Today, we're diving into a beautiful, sacred love story from the land of Sindh. It's a timeless tale that really speaks to the heart. The story of Jam Tamachi and Noori.
Let's start with this quote because it perfectly sets the stage. True love is not recognized by noise, but by a quiet heart. This isn't a story about grand, loud declarations. Oh no, it's about something much deeper. A quiet, powerful connection that ends up transcending everything.
You see, you have to understand that folktales from the land of Sindh are so much more than just stories. They're like a mirror reflecting the entire culture, its core values, and its whole philosophy on life. And this particular saga, well, it's one of the most cherished of all.
So, picture this. Our story opens at the stunningly beautiful Keenjhar Lake. Imagine a vast, shimmering sheet of blue water with golden sunlight just dancing across the surface. It's right here, in a small fishing village on the shore, that we meet our heroine, Noori.
Now this whole story revolves around two people from completely different worlds, polar opposites. On one side, you have a powerful king, and on the other, a humble, simple fisherwoman. Their meeting, as you can imagine, is the very heart of this tale.
And their worlds couldn't be more different. Jam Tamachi, he was a ruler from the mighty Sama dynasty. His life was all about power, living in a grand palace with all the royal trimmings. And then there's Noori, a simple fisherwoman living in a small hut, defined by her humility. Her only real jewel was the purity you could see in her eyes.
And that's what's so fascinating about how this story defines beauty. Noori's allure had nothing to do with expensive clothes or jewels. Nope, it was all about her profound inner qualities, that clarity in her eyes, the gentleness in her voice, her modest nature, and the deep, genuine humility she lived with every single day.
And then, one day, comes the moment that changes absolutely everything. King Jam Tamachi shows up at Keenjhar Lake for a hunting trip. And this is where destiny, you could say, steps in.
So as the king is standing there with his whole royal entourage, his eyes fall on Noori, and he's just completely captivated. But why? Because she's so calm, totally absorbed in mending her fishing nets, almost as if the most powerful man in the kingdom standing just a few feet away meant nothing at all. He'd never seen anything like it.
So the king walks over to her, and their first conversation is just incredible. He starts telling her about his world, palaces, immense wealth, absolute power. But Noori's world is right there in front of her. She talks about the lake, about the fish, about her village. And with her simple, honest words, the king could feel all the noise in his own heart just start to quiet down.
The king found himself drawn back to that lake, again and again. He started to realize that being with Noori, it made him feel more human than being a king ever did. So he makes a huge decision. He marries her. And, just like that, the simple fisherwoman enters the palace as the new queen.
But this was no simple fairy tale ending, not at all. Her arrival was met with instant hostility. The other queens, the women of the court, they were seething with jealousy. They just couldn't wrap their heads around the idea that a common girl was given the highest honor in the kingdom.
And this is where Noori's true character just shines through. Despite all the backstabbing and her new royal status, she didn't change one bit. As the quote says, she never saw herself as better than anyone, and she certainly didn't get arrogant about her new life. She was still just Noori.
And this humility would become her legacy. Because Noori didn't just become a queen, she completely redefined what it even meant to be royal.
So, how'd she do it? Well, for starters, she valued a person's character way more than any fancy clothes or jewels. She opened the palace doors and actually listened to the problems of the poor. She never, ever forgot where she came from, fighting for the fisher folk. She basically became the kingdom's conscience, a true voice for justice.
And as the king watched all of this unfold, he had this incredible realization. He understood that Noori was so much more than his wife, more than his queen. With her compassion and her humility, she'd become the very soul of his entire kingdom.
This is exactly why the story doesn't just end when her life does. Her actions, her character, they created a message so powerful that it became immortal. It's a legacy that's been living on for centuries.
After she passed away, the people of Sindh just refused to let her memory fade. They actually elevated her to the status of a Lok Devi, or a folk deity. And to this day, many people still revere her as this powerful symbol of humility, grace, and compassion.
Her story was also cemented in literature.
The legendary Sindhi poet, Shah Abdul Latif Bhittai, was so moved by her tale that he dedicated a whole part of his masterpiece, Shah Jo Rasalo, to her. He made sure her story would be told for generations and generations to come.
So, what's the big takeaway from all of this? Well, the story really leaves us with 3 timeless lessons. First, that real love doesn't care about social status or class. Second, that true strength isn't about power, it's about humility. And finally, that true greatness is found when you never, ever forget where you came from.
And that brings us right to our final thought. This whole story, from that quiet lake to the noisy royal court, it's really asking us to think about one fundamental question. When you really look at it, between pride and simplicity, where does true strength actually live?